every few months, I'll literally burn down my whole calendar and start over again. If I'm not satisfied, if I'm feeling out of balance, I'll sometimes chuck the whole thing and just start all over with the intention of how much time do I want to be spending in these different areas, you know?
So welcome to this episode of Exploring Emotional Overdraft with me, Andy Brown, and today I'm joined by the amazing Ken Eslick, and it's such a privilege. Ken and I have spoken a couple of times, and I think he's got a lot to tell us. I'll ask Ken to introduce himself in a moment, but Ken is an entrepreneur, author, podcaster, life coach, and president and founder of the Leaders Lab. Ken, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andy. Great to be here.
So before we kick off, I think it's really helpful for you to just share your business journey and so where you've got to and how you got there. Do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'll be kind of quick. I joined, I was a college student. I'll say that sort of in quotation marks. I was not a very focused college student. So one day, I'll say kind of on a whim, but maybe I was guided. I was like, I went from being a 19-year-old kind of happy-go-lucky guy. If I had enough money for beer on the weekend, I was happy. And one day, I don't know, I just grew up and went like, this is not working. I'm not going anywhere. And I joined the military on the spot. In fact, it was so on the spot that I went in to see the guy for the U.S. Marine Corps. And he wasn't there. He was out to lunch, so I joined the Army. I didn't want to lose my nerve, so I ended up in the Army. When I got out, it was great for me. I had a good experience there. And when I got out, the job offers for a non-college grad weren't exactly like pouring in. And I don't know why, but maybe because I saw examples in my family. There were no extremely successful entrepreneurs, but there were a lot of business owners, and so it was like, it was an option, right? It was sort of on the menu. And I started or actually bought out a small business using kind of a signature loan and credit card money and stuff like that. And ended up building up this small business, which was a first aid and safety supply company, into a decent little business. Decent enough to get noticed by a Fortune 500 company who then purchased that company from me. I went to work for them for 14 years, big US company, and rose through the ranks. So I went from running my little company of half a dozen people to, within a few years, I had as many as 1,000 people in my down chain in corporate America. I exited there in 2012 and decided to get into the field of recruiting. And that's evolved now specifically into leadership recruiting, which my wife is the co-founder of our current company. And we've been doing that for, the better part of like 12 years now, but our newest company is about 3 years old.
Fantastic. So interesting that you shared that you started on the credit card. That's how I started my first company as well. Just maxed out the credit card.
Nothing about that blind faith of like, I'll figure out how. Yeah.
You just step off and hope
Totally.
It's going to work.
I also think it depends on, what life stage you're at. I mean, I was in my early 20s. It didn't seem like there was as much at risk, you know what I mean? And there wasn't a lot of income that needed to be made up, so, yeah, I mean, now I don't know if I'd be as risky,
That's fair point. So, I'd just like to explore the idea. So the purpose of this whole podcast is to try and understand more about emotional overdraft. And for anyone listening for the first time, an emotional overdraft is subsidizing the success of your business or the success of your operation at your own mental or physical cost. So subsidizing the success of your business at your own mental or physical cost. And most people recognize that. Most people that run a business or run a team recognize that group of behaviors. Where do you think, because it's so interesting, you're clearly entrepreneurial. You started a business, you bought a business, on a credit card and a loan, you sold your business, you rose through the ranks in corporate America, had 1,000 staff. You're clearly entrepreneurial and business-like. Do you recognize the term emotional overdraft?
Yeah, I get it. I really did get it. And I like how deep you've gone with it, and how you help people identify it. Because, I had a friend, another entrepreneur, that we used to talk a lot about being intentionally out of balance sometimes, right? Like the need to double down on your business for a period of time, maybe because it's in its first year or two, but that it was intentionally out of balance. It wasn't permanently out of balance. It was, I need to do this for right now. If you have a sick child, you're going to tend to that sick child, hopefully, and something else might suffer, right? And so um, this idea of kind of give and take, or the push and pull of where we spend our time and where our emotions go as a result, was familiar to me, but never in such a I don't know, astute way or thoughtful way as what you guys have put into it.
Just for the listeners, I didn't pay Ken to say that. Um, it's an interesting idea, this idea of intentionally out of balance. But you are clearly a successful entrepreneur. You've bought, built, and sold a business, and then grown and been successful in corporate America. You're not someone who's had to deal with an emotional overdraft, are you?
All the time. I mean, every day, I feel like, right? I think that the most, and I know this is what you teach too, but I don't think it's about being overdrafted. I think, or at least I think the skill set comes from not trying to avoid overdraft. I don't know that that's it. I think it's recognizing overdraft and acknowledging it and understanding when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense. You had a very good way of putting it when you were on my podcast, which was the idea of overdraft being like a checking account being overdraft, or the idea that you might have to dip into savings to keep something going, and that's going to happen from time to time, but you don't necessarily want to live there, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm there all the time, but I think what I'd like to say I've gotten good at, I think I've gotten good at, not, and certainly not perfect. It's always a work in progress, but is the ability to see where I'm overdrafted, why I'm overdrafted. Is it okay to be there right now? It's sort of that pause and that acknowledgement of how am I spending my time? Where are my emotions going as a result? And is it the right place to be? Doing it consciously instead of unconsciously, I think, is the key.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you. I think this idea that the making yourself aware, or trying to be aware in the moment of that behavior, and then reflecting on the behavior. I know you don't literally stop and ponder, but you've developed a habit of identifying when your behaviors are perhaps unhelpful or suboptimal, and then reflecting in the moment and then potentially doing something differently. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Totally. And I actually will say that I sometimes pause. I don't mean like I'm the great emotional overdraft student of all time. I guess what I mean is, for me, it's my activities a lot of times have a lot to do with my emotions and my emotional overdraft. I spend a lot of time on really assessing where I'm spending my time and how that feels. And I do spend yesterday I spent, I want to say 2 hours, but I think it was longer than that. Kind of while watching a movie on Netflix, figuring out my calendar between now and the end of the year, and looking for the balance between, and I know it's a little bit different to have it on your calendar than have it in your emotions, but I feel like the two are tied together, where, there's a Tony Robbins saying that says the quality of your life is directly tied to the quality of your emotions, right? And that all kind of ties back to your actions. And so to me, it's like, well, if I'm feeling depleted in the area of family, then to me, one of the ways to feel more connected or less overdrafted in the area of family or relationships would be to spend more time on them and to be more intentional with them. And so to me, there is kind of different times, again, not in the day where I'm constantly thinking about it, but on every few days, maybe weekly basis of going, is this really what I wanted from this week? Right? Is this Is this what I intended? Is this what my outcome really was when I sat down last weekend to think about how it was going to go? And every few months, I'll literally burn down my whole calendar and start over again. If I'm not satisfied, if I'm feeling out of balance, I'll sometimes chuck the whole thing and just start all over with the intention of how much time do I want to be spending in these different areas, you know?
It's a really fantastic suggestion. I'm putting myself in the shoes of people listening to this and they're going, Ken, that's fine. You've sold your business. You've been successful. I read on your notes, you've been married over 30 years. You've got a stable relationship. You've got a support network. I am starting out. I am foot to the floor. I'm stressed. I'm struggling to do everything. My to-do list gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I would love to have time to watch a Netflix movie, let alone spend that time, reflect on my calendar, and maybe stop every quarter or 6 months and burn it to the ground. So I love what you're saying, Ken, but I can't do anything with it. What would you say if that, and I'm making that up, obviously, but I know that's what people say to me. What would you say to them?
First of all, I might challenge them on not being able to watch their hour of Netflix, because I find that the amount of time that people waste, and including myself, is pretty crazy. I mean, I catch myself saying like, "Oh, I just don't have time for this project or this thing or whatever." Yet somehow I found a way to watch all 4 seasons of Industry within about 2 weeks. I made that
It's
work.
very, very compelling, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it. Such a good show. But you know what I mean? So maybe there's something else behind that. Maybe you're not as motivated. Maybe your why isn't strong enough, and lots of other mindset stuff that we can get into. But this idea that we're going to keep doing things the same way, and we're treading water and we're feeling underwater, and that pausing to somehow create a plan to get ourselves out of there is detrimental, I feel is our mind's way of saying, just keep going, just stay the course. It's usually our need for certainty, and it's usually based in fear. If I stop running somehow, if I get off the treadmill, there's going to be a problem. Someone needs to keep running on this treadmill. I'll tell you a quick story, and because it plays into a lot of my mindset around this. I found that a lot of people that I've met in life that are really, really successful don't have like a dramatically higher IQ than the next guy. I mean, the guy running the auto body shop down the street from you might have as high of an EQ as Elon Musk. So what's the difference between these two guys? I think a lot of it is just in their preparation and their tactics and how they go about it. And I think when we feel overwhelmed, I remember I used to say I'm overwhelmed a lot, or I think a lot of times as a business owner, we'll say, well, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done, right? Everything depends on me, and we almost wear it like a badge of honor. I'm so busy, nothing to be proud of. And there was a guy that pointed that out to me, my own shortcoming. After I had sold that company that we built to the Fortune 500 company, I did well there, and I did well pretty quickly. And I all of a sudden got promoted from sort of a local general manager to an area director running several states for them. And so overnight, my job, which had already been much bigger than owning my little 6-employee company, but I all of a sudden went from having 40 people to maybe 250 people kind of overnight. And I was young and I was overwhelmed. I remember the feeling of overwhelm. And I remember he came in to see me and things were getting done, but boy, I mean, it was taking me like 14 hours a day to do anything. And I would have been the guy going, I do not have time to pause and think about emotional overdraft or any other kind of hippy dippy stuff you have going on. And he asked me, how's it going? And I'm thinking I'm going to get a big pat on the back for my answer, which was, oh, I'm working like crazy and it's kind of overwhelming, but we're getting it done. And I was looking for him to go like, right on. Like, that's why we picked you. We knew you'd work your butt off or whatever. Instead, he just kind of made a face like he smelled a fart or something. I mean, he was just like, what? And we let it go. There were other kind of people in the vicinity and stuff. We let it go. We had dinner later and I said, hey, I noticed that didn't like really strike a chord with you. What's the deal? And he said, you are only going to rise in your career to your level of overwhelm. And I think I looked at him with a kind of a confused face, and he said, "You have kids, right?" And I did. And my kids were young at the time. And he said, you know, when you feed your kid dinner, if they're not done with what's on their plate, do you just keep heaping more food on there, or do you kind of wait for them to finish what they've got? And I go, "No, you make them finish what they got." And he said, "Yeah, that's how I feel. So if this is too much for you, we're not going to give you more. The best you'll ever do is to hang on to it." And and then he gave me some tools and some, ideas and some things to think about for how to get myself out of that. But the word overwhelm just started taking on a negative connotation after that point in my mind. And I started, if I feel that, I'm not saying I don't feel that feeling, I feel that feeling, but I need a plan. I need a path. And so to me, so what I would say to that guy is the reason that you're feeling overwhelmed and the reason that you have no time for Netflix. And if you don't have time for Netflix, you don't have time for your kids and you don't have time for your hobbies, certainly. And you probably don't have time for your health. And all of this is just leading to you running a car like that's on a speedway, into the guardrail from burnout. Right. And so you've got to make a plan. You don't have time not to plan. And by planning and being intentional, you can be so much more effective.
Wow. That was
Long story,
that was a
sorry.
wise, not a long story, great story, a wise person. As you were talking, I was thinking about Rena Loisy, who I quote a lot, who's an amazing coach. And she says that your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking.
Yes.
And I love this idea that you said, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I mean, being overwhelmed is a physical state, but you can feel overwhelmed, and that's
Yes.
different. You're feeling like you can't handle it. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's a measure of the quality of your thinking. And you think, I think I'd stop at that point and go, why am I feeling overwhelmed? What's happening that's making me feel this way? That's my thinking. What could I do differently? And that's what you're doing, almost like a habit. It's become your habit to go, I'm recognizing this suboptimal thinking. I'm recognizing I'm putting myself in this position because it is you putting yourself in that position.
Totally.
And I could do this better. So I need to stop. I'm not just going to keep running.
Because we just run like crazy. And I think, Andy, our minds are geared to, and again, I've done this and I've fallen back into it. Even knowing what I know now, I've fallen back into it. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, I was in this mastermind group, and they asked me to be the COO of the group. And I didn't want to turn them down. Like, I loved the group, and I was just sort of, I'm going to say yes, and I'll just figure out how to handle it. And all of a sudden, I had 30 hours of extra work on my plate without a real plan of how to, and those feelings came in, that feeling of like, I don't know if I can do all of this, but again, it's because there was no plan. There was no prioritization. So through the planning, through the prioritization, I think without prioritization and without planning, we don't actually know where we're going. And what we'll do is we will work really hard and we will never clear out our inbox. You know what I mean? Like, because we won't be focused on the biggest task. We'll be focused, a lot of us are checklist guys, I'm getting it done. I'm getting it done. But none of it matters, or it could have been handed off.
Every check mark was created equal, wasn't it? As long as I'm checking things off, I'm crossing things through. I'm feeling I'm making progress.
Totally. But if I sit there and I think I have 50 things to do, and I really go through it and go, which one of these things actually really have to be done this week? Okay, now it's down to 20. Okay, out of these 20, what are the 5 that we just can't miss? Okay, there's my 5. And now the other 15 I can do what I'm going to do with, right? And now, and maybe those 30 that didn't have to make the week's list at the beginning, maybe they don't need to be done at all. Maybe they can be delegated. Maybe it's down the road. But again, without mapping it out, I think we're just running around putting out fires all day. So in other words, the way I look at it is when I'm not in the moment of having to just pick from one of, like you were saying earlier, all tasks are created equal when you don't prioritize. When I'm not in that mode, let's say on Sunday afternoon, I'm watching a football game and I decide to plan my perfect week. What does my week look like? So I'm in a better version of myself. It allows me as a business owner to show up and do what I told myself to do when I wasn't in the middle of it. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, hey, when you get here, here's the decision you want to make. It actually takes the emotion and the thought process out of the day. But I think when we don't do that, we just run around putting out fires, right? We constantly do. And I think our minds are geared to, I'll deal with the stuff I want to do right now, not the stuff that I have to do. What's the most appealing thing to do right now? So business owners a lot of times never end up doing business development
because it's hard.
What's more important than business development? Yeah.
Exactly. There's so much unpacking here, and I'm sort of biting my tongue not to interrupt you because it's all such good stuff. But
no problem.
I was talking to someone recently about to-do lists, and you're talking about the inbox and it never ends. Someone said that your inbox is just somebody else's to-do list. I thought it was a lovely description of it.
I like that.
But on your to-do list, if things are hanging around and it's not because you don't want to do them or it's just somehow they're not getting done, it's probably that item on your to-do list should be broken down into smaller components. Because in a way, everything on your to-do list should be about the same sort of size. So if you had a large project, it's like remake the website. I've got one at the moment on mine, which is too big. I know it is. And it's reorganize my existing website. That's
Right.
not a task. That's an ambition. The first task should probably be spend an hour and just skim the site for things I like and don't like. And then have a conversation with the developers. That I could get done.
Hire a guy on Fiverr.
There you go.
Right? That would be a task.
That's what I should start with, not remake the website.
Yeah, you're bringing up a really important point in that. So I was mentioning being the chief operating officer of that big mastermind, and where am I going to find time? And I remember I was looking at my calendar, and again, I was already kind of like doing this for a while. I'd already had the talk with my mentor 20 years prior that said overwhelm is not a great idea. And yet you still fall back in these things. And it gave me another chance, another opportunity to re-examine what I was doing because I had to find more hours in my day. So I looked at my calendar. I had 3 hours dedicated every day for business development. And guess how much business development I did? It wasn't 3 hours. It was next to nothing because a big and, ambiguous block of 3 hours, kind of like your website thing, allowed my mind to do things like, where's my Amazon order? I think the dog needs to be fed. My mind would just wander. And so I went through and I started thinking about where am I the most productive that I've ever been? It's on an airplane. I mean, phone makers picked it up. They have airplane mode. It's not just for airplanes. It's to like stop all your incoming traffic, right? So I went like, well, what makes me successful on an airplane? Well, there's no interruptions. Sometimes there's not even Wi-Fi. I mean, I know times I've gotten on an airplane before thinking I have like 3 days of admin work to do, and you give me 3 quiet hours and I'm able to get it all done. And I feel like Superman. I'm actually looking for more stuff. I'm like, it's all done. Is there anything left? And so I was like, I just need to create the environment that makes me successful at home or at work. Right. And so, I started focusing, going back to the business development block. Okay, well, what is it about these 3-hour blocks? Well, I'm allowing for Amazon. I'm allowing for this. I'm allowing for social media. I'm allowing for all these things. And so I'm never doing the block to begin with because I never wanted to do it. Now I went, well, if I really, really focused on it, how many appointments do I need to set per week? And how much time would it really take? Like, not any of this BS, not any of this like smoke and mirrors, but if I really actually just did it, because I'm not even doing it right now. So what if I really focused on it? And I determined that if I spent 1 hour per day, and not even a full hour, but almost like a school period, like a high school period, like 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, I could probably get it done in an hour a day. And then you know what? I ended up reducing that to 3 times per week. So what I thought was 15 hours because it was undedicated and too big, like your website, ended up becoming 3 hours but it's hyper focused. I mean, no interruptions. I mean, phone down, face down, not checking email, not doing anything else. But boom, there's 12 hours right there that were just wasted before.
I can hear people nodding whilst they're listening to this. I can hear people scribbling notes. This is exactly right. This is exactly the point. It's about not just about prioritization, it's about productivity. And we're so easily distracted, and we're so easily, like you mentioned earlier, the thing on the to-do list that's, I know I can get it done, or I like doing this thing. No one likes doing business development. No one likes doing that work. It's hard. It's thankless. You don't see anything from it in the moment. It's not like you've done something. It's that cumulative 1%ing that adds up to something in the end. But you could easily skip it for a day. You could skip it for a week. You could skip it for a month. And the only thing that shows eventually is your P&L. But it's so detached, you can't really see it. So when I talk to people about this, I particularly about business development, I talk about finding the milestones. What are the milestones? What are the things you can do now that if you're doing this now, what will come will be, the revenue opportunities, or the opportunities to do new work or new clients or whatever it is. So what are those milestones that you can identify?
Yes, and that's the perfect add-on to what I was saying, because I neglected to say it, which is, if I have 1 hour, but it specifically says in that hour, make 40 connections through LinkedIn, or reach out, make these 10 phone calls. So that is how the blocks are designed, is what is the outcome for the block. And if there's nothing in there, again, our minds will just go, well, I'll just do something. I got to check the score of the game from Manchester United. Are they doing any better? You know what I mean? Like our minds just go there. That's just how we're wired. So I need direction, and I'm the perfect person to give it to myself when I'm in my higher state, which is when I'm not in the moment, right? It's almost like if I wanted to become a long distance runner, or I just want to become a regular runner, right? Well, if I get up at 5 a.m. and it's raining outside and it's cold, I don't know. I got like a lot of reasons to not make that run, right? The back starts hurting. It's cold outside. I can't find my headphones. If the night before, when it wasn't raining and I didn't have to get up right at that moment, I went, I'm going running tomorrow. I'm telling myself in advance I'm going running. If I really intend to go running, maybe I make sure that my clothes are clean, the phone is charged, the headphones are sitting there, and it's all just ready to go. And if it's all just ready to go, I'm much more inclined to do it, right? And then I've got a specific distance in mind. I've got the right gear. I've checked the weather, right? And it's the same way in business. I think for some people, when they see a calendar that is kind of designed that way, Andy, I've had people that avoid this because their idea of freedom is running around like a chicken with their head cut off, putting out fires all the time, which is not free.
It's not
at
free,
all.
but it can make you feel needed. It can make you feel wanted. It can make you feel like you're delivering on your duty. It can make you feel like you're getting stuff done. It can give you a lot of false signals, can't it?
Totally. There's so much identity around it, right? I'm the one. They all come to me for help. I've been there. But the way to truly be present with people and be effective is to have that time blocked. I mean, if I can do that with my business development, then I can do that with my kids and my grandkids, right? Like I can do it with my wife. I can do it with my friends. I'm here with you now, not doing something else right now, just doing this right now. And not that I consider my relationships a task, but maybe there's an outcome. If I'm going to spend an hour with somebody in my life, hey, I'm just going to be with them. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not worried about what's going on back at the office, because there's a time and a place for that. It's already done.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I've what I have, I'm glancing down to my right because I have the data from your self-assessment here, which we're not going to talk about in detail, but cool. It's interesting. So online at emotionaloverdraft.com, there's a 50 question quiz that doesn't take very long at all. It's not, how long did it take you, Ken? Not very long.
10, 15 minutes, maybe.
Really simple yes/no questions, basically. And from that comes a spider chart that gives you an indication of where your emotional overdraft occurs. And there are 10 10 behaviors which contribute to an emotional overdraft. And Ken is a classic right-hand side emotional overdraft. I'm starting to spot some shapes, and they're all different, but indexing particularly high on duty, expectations, JFDI, load balancing. These are really interesting and connected behaviors. But it sounds to me like you've then designed, whilst that's your reflex, you've designed a system whereby you don't just respond to your reflex. You have to manage that in order to be the most effective that you can be.
Right. And I'll also tell you that as I'm taking this, I would say I'm at a point for me of being a lot more overdrafted than normal. And I want it to be even more than I took it before you came on my podcast, which was a couple of months ago. And I think I was more at ease at that time. And then we had some personnel turnover and stuff like that. And so when I took it again, it was like, no, this is how I'm feeling right now today. You know what I mean?
And you're indexing, so since we've gone there, where you don't index is at a loss, cost, trust, urgency. That's clear from what you talk about, your prioritization, your organization, those things you have sorted. But the top of your list was with a big score was duty. And I'm really interested why you might think that duty, that the feeling that it is your job, that is your responsibility as the leader, as the top dog. Why do you think, well, how do you think it manifests itself, and why do you think duty is such a big deal for you?
Well, I think a lot for our business falls on me. And I think a big part of that is we've got a young staff and a young company. So it's not that I don't trust them. They're great, but they're at earlier stages of their development. So there's still a lot. And I don't like this about where we are right now. Like, I understand it, right? Like, I know that I can't be the guy long term in this business, or the only guy at least. And so we're working on it, but we're not there, right? I still feel like the buck stops with me on many, many things. But it's a work in progress,
and that
you know?
is reflected in all the other behaviors that index quite highly for you, which is the expectations. Yeah. JFDI is just flipping do it, is that kind of doer mentality, getting stuff done, although it sounds like you're productive. Empathy was in there, which I didn't mention. And again, that you're presumably a feeling of needing to support these younger members of your team who you just can't ask to do the same things that you could expect to do, perhaps.
Yeah, I saw it too. And I wanted to refrain from diving into it and making any conclusions on my own until we got on here, right? But I just saw the spider diagram and was like, yeah, that's, in a nutshell, it's pretty accurate.
So empathy is an interesting one. You index high on empathy, which a lot of people go, well, that's a good thing, Andy, isn't it? Of course, it's a good thing to be empathetic. But the empathy we're talking about here is over empathy, is over empathizing, is feeling the need to stay late when others are staying late, feeling the need to sacrifice, to feel like people like you and respect you. And again, nothing wrong with that as such, but I'm wondering where that's showing up for you and how you deal with it.
I think, I guess I would always pride myself on being, I'm not afraid to get in there and get in the weeds. And I feel like I'm asking a lot of these young folks right now that are learning and growing. And I do feel this need, not just to meet them where they're on, but to maybe take an extra step to show a good example, to show that we're in there, willing to do the same work together. I don't think it'll be a long-term thing. Again, I think I feel, I don't know, bad, but I feel out of balance a little bit when I am asking a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't mind pushing people. Certainly never been a problem for me, or being direct with people. But it does weigh on me if I've been pushing them to be maybe overdrafted for too long. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, I'll take the hit. You don't need to take the hit. You know what I mean? Maybe it's the military, hero in me that's like, no, if someone's got to sacrifice, I'm not trying to say I'm a martyr, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's my company. I'm the one that should go first. I'm the one that should be working late if someone's got to do it,
But you've told us already that that's not a sustainable model in the medium long term. So are you saying that this is, you're consciously doing this now because it's needed now? You're trading in that overdraft. You're overdrawn.
Correct.
But you're really aware of it, and that at some point you will ease back from that. You will have designed your business in such a way those people will have had the experience, got the promotion, maybe hired some more people. So whilst you're
Correct.
doing that, you're designing a more sustainable business underneath.
Exactly. So what happened was when we started this newest company, which is only about 3.5 years ago, it took off like crazy. It grew like crazy. We actually, if you would have tested me a year ago, I'd be more imbalanced a year ago. But I was probably also a little more fearful because I knew we did not have the systems and stuff to support the growth that we had. We had some kind of dead weight, frankly, on the team. And all of that stuff kind of hit this year. And so now we're in this process of making sure those systems are in place, that the right people are on the team. We had some turnover for the first time in like 3 years, and it was good ultimately, but not always on the exact time frame that you wanted or whatever. And so, yeah, this is very temporary, and not trying to be too corny here, or Mr. Silver Linings Bright Side guy or whatever, but um, sometimes your problems really do create like your greatest opportunities, because it's sort of like, I think we were enamored with our own profitability and sales gains over the last couple of years. And so different things were forming, underneath the surface, that the nice profit numbers and the nice sales numbers were hiding. And then it comes to light and it's like, ooh, okay, this is an opportunity for us to build an even better company, right? So what we're doing right now, and that's why I'm so involved, is some of this stuff. When you talk about vision, and when you talk about, there's certain things you can delegate and there's certain things you can't. Yeah, and we're into the vision slash architect of the company phase right now.
And this is the image, I think, in analogies, but this has been popping in my head whilst you've been talking, which is the standing on the bridge of the ship. You can get down there and grab an oar and row with everybody else, but that's a directionless ship. And all you're doing is help it go a little bit quicker in whatever direction it's decided to go in. Ultimately, you need to be on the bridge of that ship, looking at the horizon for the risks, for the opportunity. Where's the land? Where are the pirates? Where are the icebergs? Where's the next shoal of fish? How are we going to feed people? And that's, if you're not doing that, nobody's doing that. So it's invaluable, I think, and that's what you're talking about here. It sounds to me.
No, it really is, and it's. I think businesses go through evolutions, especially if they're growing, where I think what we're talking about sometimes, where owners are just operators and they're just involved all the time and they're not really ever standing, at the front of the ship ever, right? Because they're just in the weeds and they get their identity from it. That's different than going, hey, I'm starting a company, and almost every company that's starting, the owner is going to be all in, right? And is going to be out of balance. Then after a period of time, hopefully they're doing it with some level of design where they can start working on the business and not in it. But then there's always different levels of growth where it's like, okay, now it's time for more attention again, right? Now it's time. We scaled from here to here. Now it's time to go from here to here. And, you know, unless they've completely outsourced that, or unless they've gotten to a point where a CEO has taken their job, or someone that's going to now stand in front of that ship, it's time sometimes to get back in, but not to stay there.
Yeah, that's very true. I also think about, I heard somewhere, and I hope this is right, and I do need to check it, but until the 1950s, there was no plural of priority. The word was priority. There was a priority. And priorities crept into our dictionaries. So you could have, because it's from the Latin or the Greek, primo, meaning one or first. So there's logically, there can only be one priority. And as you were talking about your diary, and I'm thinking about this in terms of the leadership you just talked about, you're saying that you can prioritize and you can have different priorities, but you're doing that by being very specific about, when you're doing a task, you're being very specific. You know what the outcome is going to be, not just what the input is going to be. So could you tell us what your diary now, for me, is taking on mythical proportions, because you spend so much time working on it, which is brilliant. Typically, what does your week look like? You're running a business, it's growing, you've had to step back in a little bit. What typically would a week look like?
I'm an early riser, also an early sleeper. So, I get my sleep, but I'm always up by like 5 a.m. I have a large team, not large for us. Most of my team is in South Africa. So, and I'm in New York. So right now with our clocks just changing, they're like 7 hours ahead of me. So my busy time, whatever you want to call it, time to connect with my team, time to have meetings and all of that is really very early. Like I could start at 3 or 4 a.m. if I wanted to, but realistically, I'm kind of starting work usually around 6 a.m. Working out is I'd say one of the things, going back to this 1 hour blocks and schedules, and I'll relate that back to my weekly schedule, is when I was talking about that business development exercise and going, I think I need 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, blah, blah, blah. What do I really need? The thing I would encourage everybody to do, and this is what I do when I said I blow my calendar up every few months or so, is what are the important things in my life and how much time do I need to spend doing them? And so it's not just in the business, but working out is important to me. I have a gym in the house. How often am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? Right. And so for me, every other morning, I'm hitting the gym in the house for a full, like a big workout. On the other days, I might just jump down just to do some quick cardio or something like that. But I can start a little bit earlier. So, but all of my days, whether it's in the gym or up here in my office, um, I'm in one of those two places at 5:36 a.m. And I hit it very hard until about noon. And then starting at about noon, I'll take some calls and then I'll just kind of wrap up around 4, something like that. In between, if I need to do other things, personal things, whatever, those are sandwiched in there as well. But the structure I think for a good schedule or a good calendar, it's like the building blocks. It's like, okay, BD 3 times a week, working out 4 times a week. Um, even personal stuff that you want to do, time with friends, maybe every, Wednesday and Friday night, you go hang out with your friends. Maybe you're on a softball league. I don't know, but all of those things, you build all the recurring tasks in there first. And so the framework for the calendar is built. And then on the weekend, it's like, okay, what is on the priority list and what bubbles up to the top? When does it need to be done? And how do I fill in the holes that are left? So mine ends up being, I think, a very healthy mix. Right now, it's a little work heavy, 6 to 4 or 5 p.m. obviously equals a 50-hour week. But again, sandwiched in there is lunch and workouts and stuff like that. So
And you're
it's
doing
not
this
too
knowingly
crazy,
at the moment
but
as well.
doing it knowingly. Listen, if it was only within the confines of what I just gave you, it'd be fine. But I geek out on like fixing stuff sometimes. So like, like I said, we got a little behind from a system standpoint. So I probably spent 7 or 8 hours this weekend redesigning some of our systems. And I actually like it. You know what I mean? Like I was watching football while I was doing it. It wasn't a super involved task, but it required me to do it, at least that part of it, to get it to where it was today. Then I could give it to the team to kind of finish it off,
And I think this is so important, isn't it? Just for people listening, what I'm not saying is that you shouldn't be in overdraft. I'm absolutely not saying that. I think an overdraft is a necessary facility. It gives you the ability to burst past your current financial ability or your current emotional, physical personal resource ability into an overdraft and be there when you need to be there. All I'm saying is you can't afford to be there all the time. That's not a smart way of borrowing. It's not a smart way of borrowing money, and it's not a smart way of borrowing resource, energy, effort from yourself. And what Ken's been sharing here so brilliantly is this idea of really valuing your own time, really understanding what you're going to bring to the business, what you're going to bring to your team, what you're going to bring to your family, what you're going to bring to your community, whatever it is that you're contributing to, and understanding where you bring the most value to that, and then getting smart about delegating and prioritizing and moving things on to other people. And sometimes you'll need to be in your overdraft, but you cannot afford to stay there. So I just really wanted to push that point home because it can be missed, because I talk about this a lot. and I kind of skip past it. But that's the critical thing. If you're starting a business, I've started 2 or 3 businesses, and I absolutely know that feeling where you are head down, really long hours, really working hard, no real balance. Maybe your health's suffering a little bit. Maybe you're not seeing enough of your family. Even in those moments, though, I promise you, and listen to what Ken's been saying, I promise you, you can get the balance. Sometimes you can sacrifice some things, but you do not need to ever sacrifice your health, mental or physical, to achieve success. You will not achieve success if you do that in the medium term. So how do you fit that in? And if you find joy in your job, which Ken clearly loves geeking out on some of these things, I'm the same with AI right now. I'm really fascinated by AI and what it's doing in the industries I work in. And I will spend the weekend tinkering to see what it can do, because that's not work. That's deeply satisfying for me. But if you're thinking to yourself, I don't have the time to go to the gym, I don't have time for my kids, I don't have time for I don't ever see my friends, you've got the balance wrong. That is not sustainable, and you will not build that amazing thing you stand the chance of building right now. You'll jeopardize the opportunity of doing that. So it's hard to hear, but Ken's given us a load of really interesting, useful, practical tools to think about the shape of our week and our month. And just the last thing, you said burning down did you call it burning down your calendar, burning down your diary? What do you mean when you say that? Can you be more specific? When you tear it up, what do you do?
There just becomes a point sometimes where I look at it and I go, this is not as effective as it once was. This was a good plan 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Now I find myself changing it all the time, moving stuff around. I'm constantly reordering the days, because one thing that I didn't mention, that I think when people see a calendar like that and go, "God, it's so regimented," or whatever, it's set up with a high degree of flexibility, meaning, of course, things come up. Of course, clients call. Of course, there's a fire. Sometimes it happens. But the difference between having something specific like the business development block where I'm calling 15 people and that is the outcome, that looks to me mentally a little more like a doctor appointment. If I don't just cancel a doctor appointment. If I need to see the doctor, I reschedule it. So if I was supposed to do 15 business development outreaches, it's got to go somewhere else. So going back to what you were saying about burning it down, was I'm not being as effective with that schedule anymore. I'm not feeling as in balance maybe with that schedule anymore. I'm feeling that something is off from an overdraft perspective. Like, this schedule is not allowing me enough time for me.
So it's
maybe
not serving you,
right?
You're
It's not serving
serving
me in
it.
some way. Exactly. And I'm going, I just don't like it anymore, because the result of a good schedule actually isn't, "Oh God, I've got so much to do." It's actually, you're excited to walk into it, because the things that you said you didn't have time for, the friends that you didn't make time for, because you always had time for them, you just didn't make time. You didn't make time to work out. You didn't make time to spend with your kids. Same with me. I've done it, a million times. But now I look at it and you go, if it's inspiring, if it's done the way you want to do it, it really will inspire you. You'll go, because, oh, maybe I can have it all, or I can at least try. I've at least got a plan to try to have it all, right? To spend time with my family, spend time with my friends, get the big thing done at work that's important. Forget about the rest that's not important, right? And be focused and be present. And so I get excited with a new calendar. So if I'm just feeling a little bit like even in a rut for too long, I'm not saying for a day, but if I'm like, this just hasn't been working as well, I'm going to blow it up. I'm going to build something that's exciting again, and I'll just redo the whole thing.
And do you do this yourself, or do you have a PA or an assistant, or how does that happen?
You would think I would delegate it, but I don't.
Okay. So you own it.
I'll own that initial build of the calendar. Now, people on my team can look for the openings from the build and schedule people with me and do different things and get back to people. But the actual structure of the calendar, I don't want someone else telling me, where that balance is. Like, how would they know? How would they know how much time makes me feel good to spend working out or what? You know what I mean? Like, so they assist me, but I build it. They help run it after it's built.
And I've got one more question for you before we get to hopefully your one small change. Who holds you to account for this? Because you're very accountable. I can hear that. You take responsibility and you are accountable. Who holds you to account?
Me? I mean, I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's real. You know, I have a friend named Tommy Rosen, and I remember this is going to sound like a weird analogy, but I remember I was telling him he's a kind of a world famous yogi guy and like a really good guy. And I remember I was struggling with like an injury, and I was at this yoga retreat, and I was explaining to him why I couldn't do certain things. And oh hey, my IT band's a little. I don't know why people feel the need to explain this stuff to their instructor. The instructors don't care, right? But his response was so great is he said, all I ask is for you to have an honest practice for you. You know when to push yourself. You know when to lay back. And I just thought that was so cool. So I'm the one that holds me accountable. But the other thing I do as part of that is I share my calendar with my team. So my team knows my outcomes. My team knows we have a lot of dashboards in our company, and I don't absolve myself from those. If I'm telling them, the Leaders Lab is a talent acquisition company. So for leaders, right? So we're placing leaders in jobs. Big portion of my team does sourcing. They have sourcing numbers up. Everything's measured. Big part of my team does recruiting. They convert candidates for jobs. They have numbers. Everything's posted up. I do business development. I have the podcast. I have these other things, and my results are also posted up. So I think I'm the one that created that, but now the culture almost demands it in a way that we hold each other accountable, through transparency.
And I knew there was something. I knew there was something in there that was that. Yes, you is the right answer, and that's where it comes from. But also, you've created a culture of accountability, which is less common than you might think. We've run out of time. I wish we could carry on. I do have though. One of the things we asked you to think about was one simple change, which is what we talk about in emotional overdraft, making simple changes, though not easy, simple. Have you got one you can share with us?
Yeah, I know we've been talking
Great.
about it. We went there quick and kind of stayed there,
We always do, actually,
for 2/3. But the simple change is, I think that your actions lend to your emotions, and your emotions lead to your quality of life. And emotional overdraft is all about that. How am I emotionally feeling about, where I am, where my time is being spent, and all of that. So I think this idea of being really intentional with your time through some of the things that we talked about is huge. And it's not that hard to get started. Again, just sit there if you're not a computer guy, you just sit there with blank paper and write down, here are all the things that I'm trying to get done every week. How much time do I think it's going to take? How much time will it really take if I'm actually focused and non-distracted? And then I think a lot of people come back to me, I'm anticipating the pushback from the audience right now, Andy, where it's like, how can I prevent distractions? Everybody like walks in my room, in my office. I have people that you created that. You created that. I created that. If people are used to me responding within 1 minute of every text message, because that's what I've always done, then until I tell them it's going to be a different way, they'll think something's wrong if I don't do that. I condition that behavior, right? Open door policy doesn't mean that they can open your door whenever they feel like it. It just means you're accessible, right? So there's times you just say, leave me alone. You don't have to answer emails every 5 minutes. Everybody always comes back and says, if a customer reaches out, they're probably going to be fine in a couple of hours. Most of us aren't, diffusing nuclear bombs or something, right? It's not the end of the world. Yeah. So, we've created that environment, so we have to create a new environment, right? And the tonality in creating that new environment is, hey, it's not you, it's me. you're not doing anything wrong by reaching out to me. I just want to let you know that, and with your employees, it's easy because it's, hey, I'm trying to serve you guys in the best way possible. And if you haven't noticed, I sometimes run around like a chicken with its neck cut off. I got to get more disciplined. I got to get more focused here. And I remember coming out with rules where I said, if you need to get me right away, call me, but understand you're taking me off task. You can call me. Okay. Next most effective way is text. I'll check that once an hour. Because again, I'm doing 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. So I can always check your text. Third way would be Slack, right? And I just kind of prioritize, like, this is how we're going to communicate. And usually it's no more than an hour, maybe two, that I'm going to get back to them, depending on what modality they reach out. In the meantime, I can just stay on task. So everybody can do it.
You're a genius, Ken. That's fantastic advice. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on today. It's been lovely talking to you again. If people want to get in touch, because you do really good work, if you want to get in touch, where do they find you?
Sure. Just find me on LinkedIn. I'm one of the only Ken Eslicks out there, I'm sure, or you can Google the Leaders Lab. You'll find us there. And we do work. I know a big part of your audience is in the UK, and we work over there as well. So, and the rest of Europe. So anybody listening, I'm sure we could consult with and see if there's an ability to partner up. And then they could check out our podcast too, the Leaders Lab podcast, and you can hear Andy on there.
It's a good episode. I mean, if you had any doubt about whether you should talk to Ken about recruiting leaders for your business, surely now you do not. This guy is inspirational. Ken, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. It was my pleasure.
Well, I hope I wasn't too much of a fanboy in that with Ken. I love the clarity of his thinking. And that's why I was so excited to have him on as a guest. And I hope you enjoyed that too. I wasn't expecting it to become a 1-hour conversation about diary management, but that's what happens with this emotional overdraft. You know, when we're exploring emotional overdraft, we're holding it in our hand and seeing where it takes us. And I just felt that was so valuable and so useful. And I know some people will really benefit from hearing that. So I haven't got a big wrap up on this one. I just want to just emphasize a couple of things that Ken said, and one of them was prioritization, and the idea of knowing what's important and what you can do that's most valuable for the business. And the other thought is the obvious one here, which is making the absolute best use of your time. And sometimes when people say to me, "Well, you can make time to do such and such," and Ken said that a couple of times, you can make time to do these things. I know how that feels because I've been at the very wrong end of an emotional overdraft. And if someone said to me, "You can make time to relax, you can make time to be with your family, you can make time to watch Netflix," my brain would be screaming, "No, I can't. I am too busy. I cannot make the time." But the fact is, we get to choose how we spend every single hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. We get to choose how to use that time. And when people say you can get to choose whether you watch Netflix or not, I think what they're saying is you can choose to be very deliberate about how you use your time. And so if you have a massive to-do list, you can choose to do something different with that. You can choose to delegate more of that work. You can choose not to take it on. You can choose not to respond within 1 minute. I thought it was a lovely example of something lots of us do, which is clients email me, I'm going to get straight back to them. Otherwise, what's going to happen? They're going to go somewhere else. It's not a nuclear bomb, is what Ken said. So I love this idea of choice. And that's probably the overriding thought, is that be really deliberate with your time. Be precious and guarded and protective over your time. And then use that time as effectively as you can. And by effective, I include spending time with the people that power you back up. I include your responsibilities to your family. I include your work. I include your health and your fitness. These are things that we are responsible for and that we have to fit into our lives. So as ever, you've just listened to that. My top tip would be go back and listen again, make some notes and see if you can actually be very deliberate about what you're going to do with that information. Do something with it. Don't let this be that podcast where you go, some good stuff, I'll do something with that and then get back into your to-do list. Please do something with it. And if you do, I promise your emotional overdraft will come down a little bit. If I can help, reach out and ask. I'm always happy to help where I can. I can't promise I can help, but I can promise I'll try. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like it and do all the other things you can do to help give us a little shoulder up, and do tell other people if you've enjoyed it. See you next time.